Today we are kind of getting into, I would say, a more advanced Python area that deals with Python data structures. It's kind of a really important aspect of Python. A lot of the Python data structure stuff. It's kind of theoretical knowledge, So, but I'm gonna try to practicalize it as much as I can. But just know that it's it's more of making sure that you understand how Python handles data, right? Data is just like the other things we have that we pass on to the computer to kind of manipulate the words, the numbers. um it's really as simple as words and numbers, really. So but I think it gets a little bit more um complicated when you start handling them in an actual programming, kind of trying to manipulate the data and all of that stuff. So we will get into we're gonna get into that in a little bit, and kind of try to see how far we can go with some of the practical stuff. So but even if it's not making sense a lot, just go ahead and I guess pay attention and try to go back and review. But on my part, I'm gonna try my best and make sure that I explain it as basic as I can. Today we are kind of starting with file handling. File handling is not exactly Python data structure. So, but it's kind of a prerequisite for us to get into Python data structure, because typically we pass data to Python using some kind of a file. So when you actually start building softwares, you are going to be working with a lot of files, like from storing them to reading them to manipulating them to kind of just doing different kind of processing on files to kind of build applications that actually work, right? Okay, so I'm going to use this little text file that I created. Just a little text file, just a simple text file. It really has nothing important. It just has some words about HTML when it was introduced, CSS. Just don't care about what's in there. Just how we handle it with Python. That's the important part, I guess. All right. So up until now, we have basically been writing some small scripts, just but we haven't really like saved any of that. Typically, when you write your code, it does something. You kind of want to come back tomorrow and continue from where you stopped. And sometimes, you move files around. Sometimes you create them by virtue of running your software. Think about it like before we started having databases. For instance, we had like people could probably like store information in a text file. Imagine you have like a website, it has a form and all of that stuff, and people can fill in their name. You collect their names, and their email addresses, and stuff like that. And if it's a very simple application, you can actually store all that information in a text file, right? And just use that text file every time you run your application, right? So that you can always remember the people, that went to your website and put in their name. So, but as things become more complicated, you know, those numbers of people that registered on your website, they can start running into um, hundreds of people, thousands of people, and even millions, in some cases, some really massive platforms has upwards of millions of users every day. So the applications kind of need a way to remember all that information. Unmute, please. Meeting everybody. Yeah, so your application kind of, it needs a way to kind of remember all that information. So people, instead of using a simple text file, which can work, honestly, it can actually have all that information, but that's how things have kind of evolved. And now we have modern databases that basically keep all that information. And as we move forward, instead of working with files, you kind of move up a little bit and start interacting with databases. At that level, you start using APIs to kind of query them, and things kind of get more advanced like that. So, but you you kind of get the point. It all starts by understanding how Python handles like simple things like files. Um, yeah. Okay, so that's a little backstory. Uh, it all happens inside the computer. Nothing persisted in all the other things we've done. I mean, it's been useful for practice. Yeah. So, but in this session, we are diving into file handling, and we'll learn how to read files, how to write to them. And once we can do that, we'll be able to start working with data in Python, analyzing logs. That's a very popular use case for file handling. Um, Analyzing logs is very popular, kind of like when you have a software running and it's printing, all those things that looks like garbage, or gibberish on the computer console. Those are usually like logs that developers take them and process them, and kind of, if there is any error in the software, it shows in the logs. Scraping emails is another avenue, that file handling could also help. Uh, Typically, Python is actually a very important uh, language in web scraping. A lot of the products that are built from from things like Google. Google search is basically originally a web scraper that just, is just running around everywhere on the internet, scraping all the websites that are available, gathering all those information, and probably saving them in a file, and then using those files to kind of determine what you're looking for when you type something on the search box. So all of those stuff are, kind of things that are very, very useful that you can achieve, just by learning how to manage files, just kind of learning how to read and write files. So we are starting with this little file on your screen, and it's nothing complex, but I'm sure we can get the whole idea of what we are trying to do. So first of all, you got to know that typically when Python reads a file, just like just like it is in actual Python code, you see that they're all numbered line by line. So even the text files that are not code, Python reads them line by line, so it's line 1, line 2, like line 3. That's how Python reads them, not individual words. Eventually, we'll learn how to kind of, split them into individual words and kind of manipulate them. But on a very basic level, when Python reads a file, it reads them line by line. And then another thing I want you to know that when you look at a simple text file like this, it would probably just look really simple, but there are some features of this text that are only visible to Python. They are not visible to you who is just reading it. Like for instance, when Python reads this file, Python reads everything here, but there is also another there is a value at the end of each line that looks sort of like this, right? So in reality, these lines actually look sort of like this to Python when Python reads them. And this is just for knowledge sake, so that when we actually start working with the file, you don't get confused, right? So if there are words at the end of the line, there is this thing. It's not visible to you, but Python can see it. But this is just something that tells Python that this is the end of the line, and this is a line break. That means continue on the next line, right? And then even if there is nothing on that line, then that means it's just this line break. So otherwise, Python is just going to see the whole. It's just going to see the whole thing. You're inside your text. All of them on the same line. Just like that, like everything on the same straight line, right? So these little things, these little line breaks here, it's what tells Python that okay, that's the end of the line. Start from the next line, right? So, but typically, it's not visible to you. It's not visible to the ordinary eye, right? That's just a programming thing, and it works like that across almost all programming languages that I know of. So we just telling Python, go to the next line. All right, cool. So now that we understand that, we can actually get into reading this file, right? So let me see. I think I can create a new file, a new Python file. Let me just call it read files, read file.py. That should work, right? So just like any other thing, when we are trying to do something in Python and we want Python to remember it, we typically assign it to a variable. It's just our way of telling Python, hey, there is something you're gonna do, but I want you to remember it. I remember it with this thing here, right? So we use the open function, which is an inbuilt function in Python, to read files. In this case, my file is called word.txt, right? So that's the name of the file. So when I tell Python, hey, open word.txt, Basically, Python is going to find these words. Oh, it's actually words. Words.txt here. But let's say I don't get the name of the file, right? Python is just going to throw up an error, and we can actually just see that, just to make sure. Where's it's words.txt. Oh, no, that's not what I'm trying to read. Okay, yeah, that's the file I'm trying to run. And if I go ahead and I run it, we're just gonna get a traceback error. But we can understand from this that it's on our line 1, and then Python is just giving us as much information as it can that the file cannot be found. This is gonna happen to you a lot when you start working with files, because most of the time, you can easily make mistake on the file names, right? So you have to always cross check to make sure that you're getting the name correct. And once you have it correctly, and now Python is no longer complaining because it's able to get the file, right? Now, if we tell Python to print this file, something interesting kind of happens. We'll see that Python is not actually giving us what is inside that file, right? Because when we say Python, open this file and then assign it to this variable, Python is not just not is not we are not looking at what is inside the file just yet. We are just looking at the file itself, right? So it kind of gets interesting from there, because we have a few tricks to kind of get into the file and start reading them. But if you look at the output on the print statement, you notice, some stuff. It has the name of the file there. It has a mode. It has an encoding. These are important information, actually, very important information, right? The R is for read. There are several different modes. If I do something like ls now, on my computer, you see all these files here. I can read them because they are on read mode, right? If you start working in like a Linux environment, it gets kind of more interesting, because there are so many different modes that a file can have, and some of them can actually prevent you from reading them. So sometimes when you're trying to read the file and it's throwing up an error, you might want to check if it's on the read mode. That way that you're going to be able to you are actually allowed to manipulate the file. The encoding is also very important. This is kind of like an olden days stuff. It's no longer very, very relevant today in programming, because a lot of these issues with encoding have already been handled, and most programming languages, they don't have issues reading file. But if you're using like Python 1 point something, maybe Python 2 even, you might, no, I think even from Python 2, they already, resolve all the encoding issues. But if you're working like a really old version of Python, you can run into issues with encoding. But mostly you might never ever, need to do anything with this guy. So, yeah, so we don't just open the file and print it. I guess that's the lesson from that line too. For us to actually go ahead and read the file, we need to use one of the techniques that we already learned in the previous sections, the loops, especially for loop, right? So we will normally do something like this. For line in F hand, then print line. So what it means that before we're just printing we're just trying to print the file, but because Python reads the file line by line, for us to get what is inside the file, we need to loop through it. So basically, once Python opens this file, it takes all these things inside here and it reads them, like I said, line by line. So it just index them and, kind of give each line an index. So this is index 0, index 1, index 2, like index 2, index 3, like that. So we can actually loop through the whole content of the file to be able to be able to access what is in there. So that's the whole point. And another thing is, you will notice that we are using for loop. Remember, we have a second kind of loop, which is the while loop. And what's the reason why we will go for especially this particular kind of loop for us to go through a file? The simple reason is because this is a file. It's certain the number of lines that are inside this file, right? So remember when we talked about loops and right now, and I told you that we use the for loop when we have an idea of the number of loops, the number of iterations, the number of things we are trying to loop through, right? But there are scenarios where we have no idea of, the number of things we are trying to loop through. Those are the scenarios where we need a while loop. But when we have things like this, you have a file, that means we can already determine the number of things in there. So it's not a speculation. So that's why we can just loop through all the lines inside this file f hand, and then we can now print each line, right? So if we go ahead and we run this file right now, we will see everything inside the file will be printed to the screen, right? So another thing you will notice is that our file has line 1, and it goes straight to line 2. There is no space in between, like so, right? There is none. But if you look at the printout on the console, you notice that there is an extra space in between line 1 and line 2, and then on this line 2 to line 4, it becomes even worse because now we have so many space, right? This is kind of, the other thing that I was trying to explain to you initially, that hey, the way Python read this is, there is an n here, right? And no, there is an n here. This means there is a new line. We are going to the next line, new line. That's basically what this means. But there is a twist, because the print statement also adds a new line whenever it prints something. So it becomes double new line. It becomes double new line. Like there is a new line here, and then when it prints that line, Python adds an additional new line. So that's why, it's kind of spreads out this way. And I mean, it doesn't look good. I would have thought that maybe they would have removed something like this they would have fixed this kind of issue, but I don't know why it's in there, but it's kind of how it works. So you kind of need to be aware of how Python is reading the files, because most times when you are writing some Python program and you have to read files, you may not really be printing them to the console, right? You just know in your head that there is this new line there. So that's kind of the idea. Yeah, so I mean, successful. Now we know how to read the file and print it to the console. One important thing you gotta know is we are accessing this file with just the file name. only because it's in the same folder, right? It's in the same folder. That's the reason why we can just use the words, right? If, say, for instance, we have a new folder here, and then we move this file inside into the new folder. Now, this file is no longer inside the current folder. How can we access it now? When we run our code, it throws up an error because it can no longer find this file, right? So it's very, very important. There is a feature in VS Code that actually kind of allows you to copy parts. If you copy this one, it will give you the complete path to the file, right? Which can work, right? For instance, we can use this complete path to the file, and we can read the file, and it works, right? But it does not look good. That's why we have another option above it or below it that's called relative path. So this is just, it's going to copy just the the uh, the path to the file that is relative to the current folder. So if you copy this one and we go in here, then we'll get a more cleaner path to the file, which still works, because this is just telling Python that, hey, on the current folder, there is another folder called new folder. And then if you go into it, that's where you find the words .txt, right? Really, really important stuff. I've run into several issues personally myself, while building, some small solutions as for my automation as a DevOps person in the past, just because of a little misunderstanding with, the whole folder and file structure thing. So this is actually a point of a popular point of error for many programmers, right? So you kind of spend several hours trying to debug your code before you find out that, oh, okay, I wasn't pointing to the right folder. So now we can run our file and it works. So our file can be anywhere on the computer. Sometimes it's not even in the computer. Sometimes you need to fetch the file, by calling some API or, doing some kind of widgets, all of that stuff, but as soon as you begin to understand how it works, how the folder structure works, how Python reads the file, the lining and all of that stuff, you're not going to have any problem with any of that as you advance, right? So basically, our code loops through each line in this file, and then it prints it. And then our for loop works. We can actually call this thing anything we like, just so you know. Line is not something peculiar to files. It's just a variable in this case, right? So we can actually call this thing anything we like. Let's say take, for instance, and it's still going to work. But the difference between this, doing something like this and doing something like this, is that even though it works for Python, there's no difference. It's all good. Python doesn't complain. But you as a human being who is trying to read it, it doesn't make sense, right? The second, this one, it doesn't make sense because it's we need to kind of, the words we're using in our code, you need to kind of make sense. Otherwise, other people will find it very difficult to read our code. So that's why we do something like this. And I've seen this thing so many times in software that it's kind of like a culture in programming to just do it like this. But just know that it doesn't mean the line itself, it's not really doesn't really have any peculiarity with the files you're reading. It just for it to make sense to the person reading it. So that's the thing about reading files. At this point, we now have we now see how we can read we now see how we can read files, and then most times in your files you're gonna have words, you're gonna have words, and remember that words typically in Python we call them strings, right? We call them strings. Numbers, these are integers, but unless you convert this number inside this file to an integer, it's still a string. So this is very important because we actually have a whole lot of library, no, a whole lot of module in Python to deal with strings. And I'm going to show you what some of them are in a little bit. But before I get into that, I could use this opportunity to show you an example, right? You see how when we read this file, it goes ahead and it adds all these extra lines that are not originally in our file. We have a way to make sure that Python does not do that, right? And it kind of looks something like this. All right, let me just put it here. It kind of looks something like this. This is one of the inbuilt function. So yeah, one of the inbuilt function inside Python that we can use to manipulate strings. And merely looking at it, it's just telling us that it's stripping something. Strip, it's kind of cutting something off. So when we do something like line.strip, it means cut something off. And the R here, I believe this is for write, because we also have one. I think I've seen something like this as well. L strip. So we have L strip, we have R strip. R strip is just for you to strip something. If it's strip any white space, we call them white spaces. So all of these invisible stuff that are at the end of the line, we call them white spaces. These are also white spaces, right? So in terms of R strip, it will work for these normal spaces. It will work for this kind of white spaces as well, which this one is kind of like indicating a new line, right? So it's just telling us strip whatever is at the end, whatever white space that is at the end of the line, and then the L strip is for the left. Whatever whatever white space that is on the left side. Typically, you will use something like this. Assuming you have like a file that maybe have the indentations like this, right? And then when you read them, you want to make sure that any white spaces here, they are not there. It's not. It's just so that we can do things like this. These are not things that you need to memorize or anything like that. It's really just for knowledge sake, just so like there is so much more we can do. And I'm going to show you that we have so many more functions like this that we use to deal with strings, or lines inside the file. I think I have a screenshot of most of them somewhere here. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, must be this guy. Yeah, it's called the string library, right? These are probably all of them. If you can see my screen, can you guys still see my screen? You guys can still see my screen, right? Come on, somebody say something.
Yes, I can see your screen. Screen library 4.4.
Cool. So these are all the other. This is the guy. This is the L strip. This is the R strip. This is the one that we just used right now. So this guy will, cut off whatever is on the right side, whatever white space is on the right side. This L strip, whatever white space is on the left side, and it can even take in parameters. Um, we have plenty like this one string dot capitalize. This one would capitalize whatever word you give it. It just put them in capital letters. This guy would get whatever is on the center. This one is kind of like a search for searching. If you want to search, there are scenarios where you want to kind of maybe find emails inside a lot of text. You just want to kind of find out email. Maybe you might use this to do something like ends with .gmail.com, for instance. So you'll be able to find all the words inside the file, that ends with this. And we also have this .find, which is a very popular one. We use it to find exact words, right? And there are all these other ones. This one is for you to replace words inside the file. You can put in the old word and then put in the new word you want to replace. And this other guy, it makes whatever word you give it to lowercase, and this one to uppercase. I wonder what is the difference between this guy and the capitalized. I don't know, but you kind of get the idea. We have all this library. They already inbuilt functions that come with Python, so you don't have to write complex code to kind of achieve all these things. These are kind of like the people who created Python. They kind of seen the pattern, the things that people need to do to manipulate files on a regular basis, and they kind of built all these ready-made functions so that you can use them instead of having to create your own functions from scratch. So that's kind of like what they are. I got a message in the chat said I shared a PDF version of the book I use in my Python class with the host through WhatsApp. Anyone who needs it. Oh, cool. Nice, Hayden. We appreciate that. Okay. I'm gonna get back to my writing code, and that's my VS code. Right. So you kind of get the idea. So this is an example of me using one of those built-in functions, in that library that I just showed you just now. So we can do much more than this, but with this line, if we go ahead and we print our file now, then it appears exactly the way it's supposed to appear without adding on any unnecessary extra empty lines in between, right? And now, because we are using this R strip, right? And now we have this guy, which is an empty line. We can also do like L strip, right? So you can do all of that. You can replace, you can capitalize based on the goal you are hoping to achieve with the file anyway. So that's typically what determines what you can do. I can show you more examples. For instance, let's say we have something like this guy. This one is saying for a line for line in F hand, we are on line 4. We are stripping all those new lines at the end of the file. And then on line 5, we are now doing something extra. We now introduce a conditional statement saying that if a line starts from, so this is now us. Now we don't want every line in this file. We just want the ones that starts with this. If we go ahead and we run it, we are likely not going to get any results because nothing in our file starts with from, right? But let's say we try something like age, for instance, right? We can try something like age. And then we can run our file. Oh, stay, because we have this little guy here. And then we can run our file right now. And Python, we have manipulated this file, and then we are only getting the specific lines that we want. So that's what this little additional code here is doing for us. Just showing you, we are using one of those built-in functions that I just showed you, in that library, that Python string library, to manipulate this file. So we don't want every line there. We just want the ones that start with age, right? That's another example. Sometimes you might be looking for maybe specific people in a file that has so many stuff. Sometimes you're looking for maybe email, sometimes maybe you're looking for phone numbers, stuff like that. So those are use cases that you might want to do something like this, right? Cool. Another important thing that we can do is sometimes you don't know sometimes you don't know the file. Sometimes you don't really know the file, right? You don't really know the name of the file. Maybe you need a user to give them to you. And we can also use input to get the name of the file. Remember when we were using inputs, to get people's name and kind of tell them welcome, simple stuff like that. So but imagine, you're actually building something, and people are going to use it for their own, to kind of process their own files. Maybe you are building an app that will ask people for their resume, and then pass through it, and then use all those things inside your CV or your resume, and then fill a form for you. If you've been applying for jobs, you would have come across something like that. So in those scenarios, you don't know the name of the file. You might use an input, right? So, but there is a catch. What if they type something wrong? Remember when we didn't give Python the exact name of the file? It blew up. So this is always prone to an error. That's why we have something like error catching. We have dealt with error catching in the past. So this is a good opportunity for us to actually, see how it can be useful, right? So we use try and except to catch errors. And if you're trying to read files from, get the name of files from people, from your users, you cannot count on them to put the name right. These days they don't even allow you to type in maybe name of the file or something like that. They just guide you through to your laptop to go and pick the file, but that might not work for every scenario. What if you need to download the file? Maybe you need to call an API to be able to get the file. The file is not on your computer. So that's where it becomes really important to use error catching. So in this scenario, we are in our line 1, we are getting the name of the file as an input from user. And then we are going to just try and open it. That's what we are doing here. But if, let's say, the user types the wrong thing, right, then we are going to tell, we will catch the error using our except. And then we are just going to tell the person file cannot be opened, or maybe file name not correct, or whatever we want to tell the person. And then the person can then try again, right? So that's the right way for experienced programmers. That's how we handle, that's really how we handle files, right? So at this point, you are doing everything right. Chances are, even a rogue user will not be able to blow up your code or your software, if you're catching the error correctly, right? So we can actually go ahead and run this right now, and let's see what happens. So it asks us for the file name, and I can get the file name by copying the relative path, and I can put it here, and we get our stuff, right? We get the result that we want. But I guess I can also make mistake here. Let me just put the incorrect name. And we see that instead of just Python throwing up and then just giving us that ugly error message, it catches it perfectly. It just gives us a more friendly output, telling us that the file we put in cannot be opened. It might also do something like cannot be found, for instance. We just put anything here, cannot be found, and then we can now try again. So that's why catching errors really, really, really important. Well, at this point, it's it's uh it's pretty much, like if you can, do everything we've done so far, and just practice it to this point, you have learned 90% of what you actually need in real life. So, but there is another important thing that I wanted to show you. Sometimes we want to count words, we want to count, like, maybe the number of letters in a line, maybe the number of words in a line. And it's kind of important because there is a little difference between the way we count the number of letters in a word from the way that Python actually counts it, right? So for context, let's use this our file, right? So let's say we give Python line 1. Okay, let me just use a very, very simple example. Let's say we give Python something like this. Open. This is a word, right? We give Python this word and we ask Python to count it. Python will tell us that there are 4 letters inside this word. But how Python actually assess this, each one of these, right? You will probably think that it just gives them numbers like this, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it gives you 4. But this is the normal way that the human brain we count the number of words in a file. But Python uses something called indexing to kind of index the strings or the files or the words inside the file that you give it. And while indexing, it starts to count from 0. So typically, when you give Python a word like this that has 4 letters, right? Python will just name them 0, 1, 2, 3. And this is going to be index 0. This is P is going to 0. O is going to be index 0. P is going to be index 1. E is going to be index 2. And N is going to be index 3. I mean, it's probably a little bit confusing right now, but just just remember this. And at some point, we are going to use it. Let me see if I can find some examples that we can use. Yeah, I guess we can use this to count. Yeah, let me just leave that in there. We can use this to count. You can do something like this. Let me just remove this guy. So now we are doing count. We have created a new variable here called count. We have created a new variable here called count, and then we have given it 0. This is nothing. It doesn't really mean anything to Python. It's just something that we are using to achieve our aim. So it's kind of like a flag. And then you see how we're using it. When we get to line 10, remember, all we have done so far is just get the name of the file and then read it and then catch any error, right? So, but from line 10, we started to get into the file. And then we want to count how many lines are inside the file. So we use this count to kind of initialize a variable, and then we can now start. Once we count line 1, we'll save it here. We'll count line 2, we'll save it here, so that once we have finished counting, we'll now know how many we've counted. So that is basically what we are doing here. On this line, Python is going to loop over all the lines inside the file, and then it's going to increment this count by 1. If you're just seeing something like this for the first time, this is kind of like a shorthand for this, right? So we are just saying that count at this point now, we are just saying that count is now equals to count plus 1, because once Python read the first line, it will add 1 to count. It read the second line, it will add 1 again. Count becomes 2. It read the third line, it will add 1 again. Count becomes 3. Like that until we are done reading the file, and then we'll know whatever count tells us at that point. Then we'll know that is the number of lines inside that file, right? That's what we are doing here. So just so you know, that's why we are doing something like this. It's the same thing. So it's just a short for adding 1 to count. We use this shorthand a lot. People like to do stuff like this, just to show off that they are pro programmers, I guess. So if I go ahead and I run this right now and I give Python the file, then Python tells us that, on line 12, we are printing it. Tells us that the number of lines inside the file is 24. So now we can start assessing specific info that are inside the file. And that brings us to another inbuilt, let me remove this guy at this point, and this guy, and this guy, and this guy, to make it easier for myself. Let me bring this guy back here. So up to this point, we are using open, to open our file, but we can also use read, right? We can also use read. So let me actually use read to do it right now. So we can open our file. This is our file, relative path, new folder.txt. So we can get our file, open it, and then we can actually read it. So this is another built-in function that we can use to manipulate files. At this point, we are reading all the lines inside the file, right? Everything. And then I'm gonna get rid of these ones. And then after we read what is inside this file, we save it with a variable we are calling input, or IMP. And now you will kind of notice we are doing something here. We want to print this the content of the file, right? But we don't just want to print it. Right now, we are trying to count the length. We are trying to check the length. That is, we are trying to count the number of words inside our file, right? Like the number of characters inside the file, right? Remember, we've kind of counted the lines, and we used our line dot count. We use the count to kind of do increments, and that works fine. But this is like another way that we can do it. We can use this built-in function called length to still check what is the length of the file that we just read, and it's just going to go ahead. If it's a line, if you give it a line, it's going to count the number of words inside the line. But if you give it an entire file, this length function is going to count the number of lines inside the file, right? And then on line 5, we are doing something a little more complex, and that's why I showed you this previously, so that you know that Python starts from 0 to kind of index the words that you give it. It doesn't start from 1; it starts from 0. So we're gonna see how that works in a little bit. So if you come to this line 5, we are telling Python, like, basically we are basically saying print inputs, but only from 0 to 20, like only from line 0 to 20. Basically, that's what we are trying to tell him here. But we don't need to explicitly put 0 here. So I just want you to know that it's there anyway. Now we use these block braces to do indexing in Python. Actually, let me go ahead and run this so that you see how it works in practical, because it kind of gets confusing when you try to explain it. So if I go ahead and I run this, we'll notice that, okay, first of all, it checks, we get the file, and then we read it. We put every content of this file into this variable called IMP. And then on line 4, we check the length. We are basically, like checking how many characters are inside it. Yeah, I might have made a little bit of mistake. This length, this length inbuilt function, it checks just the characters. It checks like what's the number of characters that are inside your file. So you can use this to count the number of characters that are inside your file, right? Let's say we don't have a file. Let me just do this. Let's say we don't have a file, and then input is equals to, let's just say, open, for instance. Let's use this so that we can understand what I did here previously, right? Where are you? Read file. If we go ahead and we run this, we see that the length of this is 4, right? And then when we ask Python to print from 0 to the 20th character, it prints the whole thing. But now, let's do something like this. We want to print from 0 to 2 of this word, just from 0 to 2. Remember, Python gives them, index them kind of, kind of like 0 to 0, 1 to 3. So that's how Python indexes them. So this is 0. This is index 0. This is index 1. This is index 2. This is index 3. All right. Just have that in mind, but I can't have this here, otherwise it will blow up the code. So if I go ahead and I run this stuff right now, we'll see that it gives us just the first 2 without including the index 2. And then we can do something like, okay, if we do 0 here, it's not gonna return anything, right? And then if we do 1 here, then it just returns the first letter. And then if we do 2 here, that's when we get the 2 letters. So what I just want to show you is that when we do index, it's 0, 1, 2, 3. When we do index, we use this to do our index. We use this block braces to do our index. When we do something like this, we are telling Python read from 0 to index 2, but we are not including index 2. So we are basically reading 0 to index 1. Maybe a little bit confusing, but that's how it works. As you continue to practice, you kind of begin to get a hang of it. So if we want to print all the words here, we are not going to, we can just say 4. And okay, we have this thing here that's not supposed to be there. You can just say 4, and that's how we get the whole thing. So even though it's, even though it's index 0 to 3, if you give it 4, it will just print from 0 to 3 without including this number. There is a way for us to, include this number if you want to, but the simplest way, assuming we have a letter at index 4, let's say this is opened, you just need to move up a little bit and say make it 5, so that you'll be able to get up to index 4, right? And then if you put 6 here, then you'll be able to get the whole word. So this is kind of important, because this is actually something that we do a lot. When you start manipulating files and kind of using them to achieve your goals, you should know how to index them properly and how to access the individual characters inside a string. That's the whole reason why you kind of need to understand that, it works this way. So that's probably like, the only other thing that we have, we could probably put in a little bit more examples, I guess, at this point. Let me do something like, something like this. If I run in, oh, okay, this is not, this is IMP, INP. And then if I run it, you see that, this is giving us 0 to 3, but let me show you. If we want to print this on line 5, we are saying print this word, but just give us the index 3 word, the character that is at index 3. Give us that character. And that's why we are getting n. Is n at index 3. If you count this, you will see that this is n is supposed to be the 4th character there, right? It's supposed to be the 4th character. That's what it's supposed to be. But it's actually the index 3 because, like I told you earlier, Python reads it like this. 5. It reads it like this. So this is actually, n is actually the index 3, the one at index 3, right? That's why the fourth letter inside this word is having index 3. But when we told Python to print from 0 to index 3, what did it print? It did not include n. It just printed the first 3. So when you are trying to access the string, I mean, I don't understand why it works like this in Python. I would have preferred a straightforward indexing where if you say print 0 to 3, it just prints 0 to 3, without all this this small tricky situation that you have to start guessing, whether the 4th word is index 3, right? The 5th word is index 4. The 6th word is index 5. But if you want to print from 0 to index 5, it doesn't include that particular last character. Well, I don't know why they made it like that, but just so you know, that's how it works. And you can easily run into problems in your software by not understanding that Python behaves like this, right? Okay. I think that's enough example for what we are trying to do. Now we have seen that we can do. We have seen that we have all those other inbuilt functions that we can also use to manipulate word, including dot lower, dot upper, strip, replace, all of those stuff. You can play with that on your own time. Just try to see how they work, or maybe not. Most of them you might never need to use them, but even if you need to use them, mostly, I mean, you are going to use some AI to generate the code anyway, so you don't really need to remember them. You just kind of need to know what they mean. So when you get the code, you understand what the code is doing. If you want to fix some error, you understand how to fix it and understand how to change it to kind of behave differently to kind of achieve your goals, right? So that's why it's important. One other example I wanted to show you kind of looks like something I've done in the past. Sometimes you have a line that have email. This is actually a popular thing that we do a lot. Like most scripting, you will probably be looking for maybe people's email so that you can contact them. Maybe you are trying to identify the people that own different resources in your company, your organization, and all you have is their name and their email, and you need to kind of go through the whole file that have a lot of other stuff and kind of filter out the email so that you can start contacting those people. So that's why I think it's important for you to kind of see this example as well, because it's a scenario that I've come across so many times, in my workplace. So let's see this example, before we close the chapter. On I have a simple line. This could be a line that is inside our file, right? And then this line has an email. I want to access, the email, right? So I have this. These are actually shitty names for my. These are shitty names for my variables. No, don't do something like this. Use better variables. They need to make sense. Oh, okay. I remember. Okay, what I was doing is at position. That's what I was trying to say. At position. I want to find a word at certain position. Interesting stuff. You have seen this. You have seen this before. This is one of those inbuilt functions that I showed you that we can use to manipulate, strings. This one works kind of like a search, like the way you search for stuff. So we are just telling it, find any, check the line and find this character. To find the word, any word inside the line that has this character, which is typically found in emails. So this is a popular feature of email addresses. Any email addresses will always have this character in it. So that's why we always use this to find email addresses from a bunch of other things that are inside the file, right? And then on the third line, we are also checking. We are now checking the where the file basically ends, right? We are using the empty space, which is the white space. We are using the empty space to find it. And then we are just saying, it's a little complicated, but if you read it, first of all, what we are doing here is, let me take them one after the other so that we kind of understand what we are doing, right? So at this point, if I print at position, right now, I hope that looks good. Okay, if I print at position right now, we get 21. If you look at this, you will see that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, minus the white space. This is the 21st index here. This is the 21st. It starts from 0. Sorry, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So this is the 21st character. That's what we've gotten here. So we have gotten the index. And then let me go ahead and activate the second line. On this line, we have created another variable, and then we are looking for an empty space, right? This empty space will be position. This will probably be like position 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be at position 4. And then we are also passing this one, position 21 here. So when you give find to, when you give it to two positions, two index, find, we use it. The first one is where it will start, right? And then the second one is where it's going to end. So it will start from here, which is this empty space here, and it will end here. So we're able to identify this guy. That's what we've done. And then if we go ahead and then we activate this line, we are saying, yeah, I don't just like this naming. Let's just call it email, please. You're saying that now our email now is our line at position 24, which is this guy. When we add it one, that's when we actually get it, because when we say at position 21, because of that little issue with the indexing stuff, it's just going to stop here, and it's just going to stop at it's just going to stop at 20, and it will not include this guy. So that's why we always add this one, this +1, so that we can now get the entire word. And I'm now telling it from here to here. We want to get all the words that are in there, and then we want to print it to the console. And then if I go ahead and I run it, yeah, I get an error. That's because we don't have a host here. So I've already renamed this to email, so I can run it now. And what we have been able to do, we have told Python that, remember, this is our this is our position 21. So we add 1 to it, so it becomes position 22. So that means it will start after this guy. Okay. And then we are taking whatever is in there up until this guy, which is definitely not this space, but this space. So that's what it's doing. So we are trying to get all the stuff from here to here. And now we're able to get this part of the email. I had a little bit of misconception, when I prepared this code, because I was aiming to get the whole thing, right? So, but it looks like we needed to do a little bit more to be able to get the whole email address. Our code have succeeded in getting just the email provider aspect of our email address. So maybe it could be a fun exercise, for you guys to actually try and see how you can get the entire email address. That's actually a good opportunity for some learning. So, but yeah, I mean, I just want you guys to see we do things like this all the time, especially with email addresses. And yeah, finally, we have been able to read our file, and not just read it, we've been able to manipulate it in different ways and search it, and kind of find words inside it, and try to slice it, and remove all the new lines at the end of it, so that it prints the original version of the files. And we've been able to go ahead and perform some search inside the lines, and kind of try to whip out the email addresses that are in there. So if you're able to follow through and write your own terminal on your own VS Code and get up to this level, you've actually learned a lot. And if you're feeling more ambitious, you can, try and, find out whatever error I've made here that is causing me, not to get the entire email address. And, you basically want to just slide down a little bit so that you get the entire thing. All right. That's all about it. Now we've learned how to read files. Eventually, in our next classes, we will start getting into data structure properly. So in data structure, we'll kind of see, how we can organize this, this data into dictionaries, into lists, into tuples and all of this stuff. And it kind of gets, a little more interesting from there. But it all starts from being able to read the files, being able to handle the strings and the lines inside the files properly, being able to understand how the indexing works, and that little tricky situation there with the indexing. And once you have a hang of it, you'll be able to you're ready to move into the Python data structures properly. All right. At this point, do we have anybody who have a question? Okay. Somebody is asking me to include comments. Yeah, I mean, definitely comments are necessary. Very, very important. You just this is like on a live class, and I'm very time conscious, and I don't want to start, putting all those typing all those long words, kind of say this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. But it would be nice to have it. Documentation. I know we've already, gone through that. We've already, treated comments in one of our previous sessions, and how they are important and how to use them and all that. The fact that I'm not using them is not a good practice, but it's just efficient, because of we're in a live class and because of time. But definitely use comments. Like, comments are very, very important. You want to tell people that, hey, you want to tell yourself, trying to find the email addresses, and then you go ahead and do something, right? And then maybe at this point, you're telling you can now go ahead and say something like printing the email, something like that. So I mean, I can go ahead and do this, but I can go ahead and do this all I want, but you kind of get the point. It's just gonna take its own time, right? So, but it's very important because tomorrow when I come back, I don't have to start, trying to figure out what each line of this code are doing. I can just look at the comments and oh, okay, this is what I was trying to do here. This is what I was trying to do here. And by the time you get to the end of the code, you kind of get an idea of what this particular piece of code is doing. And typically, you're not just looking at one file. In a typical software that's already built, you have multiple files that you want to go through. So it's actually very helpful, to have all these comments so that you kind of get an idea of what each file is doing, to get a cohesive idea of what the software is doing and where you can come in if you're trying to fix issues, you're trying to make changes or anything like that, right? All right, guys. Do we have any questions? I say someone is asking that already. So, but yeah, we normally take questions at the end of the class. So that time is now. Any questions whatsoever? Anybody have any questions? Chris, did you have any questions originally? No questions. Nobody. No questions. All right, guys. I'm gonna let you guys go and have a nice rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.